Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Lecture 5 of English 100B. Again, we'll start out with a few reminders, as we always do. You should be adding onto a grammar review cassette tape. You should be listening to it at least one time a day. And a reminder that if you're using the online grammar tutorial to supplement class presentations, the URL for that website is grammar.deanzacollege.org. Please be sure that you've subscribed to the class listserv. You have the instructions for doing that in your course syllabus, and listserv memos will give you due dates on current assignments. So today's topic, we're still on the simple sentence for the last time. We're going to get instructions for quiz number 1. We're also going to start a discussion on prepositional phrases. We'll see how far we get. We'll start out by checking your answers to exercise 4 in setting up the palette on pages 55 to 68, where you were locating subjects and verbs in simple sentences. And then we'll move to the laying out the textbook on pages 145, 147, 148, and we'll discuss instructions for taking sentence examinations. We will test each of the sentence types as we review them. And then we'll move back to setting up the palette on pages 71 to 75, and we'll master the definition and function of the prepositional phrase. Then in the same book, we'll do pages 77, 78. We'll memorize common single word prepositions, common group prepositions before the next lecture. On pages 79 to 81, I'll talk to you again about a memory system that may work for you. And then on pages 83 to 88, we'll talk about prepositional variations. A sentence can end with a preposition. You can have an implied preposition. And a prepositional phrase in English could even act as the subject of a clause. To that end, we'll analyze multiple examples in the textbook. And I will have one written assignment to ask you to do before we meet again, and that will be exercise 5, pages 89 to 96, where you get practice locating prepositional phrases in sentences. So we're going to go back to exercise 4, and very quickly, I'm going to review for you what the directions asked us to do. The objective here on page 55 was to locate subjects and verbs in simple sentences. And the idea was you had the verb as a given. No, nothing is a given here. You were underlining the subject once. In each main clause, you were underlining each verb twice. And then you were writing out the subject word or words in the first blank space, the verb word or words in the second blank space, remembering that writing out subject and verb words is automatically going to increase your accuracy and your awareness of where those parts of a clause can be found. Now, Maritza asked for a repeat of number 22, so before we go forward, I'm just going to back up to see what the problem was on that particular sentence. Greet is asked to come up to the studio to try out various poses and activities in order for the master to select the most suitable one. Well, what did you say, Maritza, was the subject?
Great.
And how about your verb?
Is asked to come.
All right, and you said that was what kind of a clause?
It's a main clause.
And what kind of a sentence?
A simple sentence.
So it's a main clause, it's a simple sentence, and is asked to come. Go ahead and ask your question.
No, the last time you also said that to try, it was also part of the verb.
Right, you could have added that, because this helping verb would have worked in both places, and I agree. So it could have been is asked to come / and you could have added to try, and you would have been very accurate on that.
But you're not supposed to be, it's great asked to come up to the studio, and I'm not supposed to have like an end to try out, so that carries the out.
Well, is asked to come, is asked to try out. In this case, I see what you're saying. There's no connecting word, and you can see it as part of this because it certainly does apply.
Because I was thinking that could it be the infinitive phrase?
If you want to take it this way, to try out various poses and activities, then you could see it that way. Either way, you're going to come out with a half verb. And if you see that half verb as part of this and also acting independently as an infinitive phrase, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
You're still coming out with a main clause and a simple sentence, and that's the big picture, and I buy it.
All
But
right.
good eye to see that. Good eye to see that. Well, let me run back the narrative content that we were working on the other day. You remember what happened. Greet was now working in Vermeer's studio, and her primary job had started out to be helping the household take care of all the washing and the ironing, and also to dust, as a special privilege, the master's art studio. Well, more and more she gets drawn into that studio to go buy certain items like linseed oil and black ochre, black bone, whatever it would happen to be, the pigments that are needed for his paints from the apothecary. And then, as she's taught to grind those pigments and mix them with the linseed oil to make the paints, once she gets past that one time where his hand touched hers and she dropped the mortar and the pestle on the floor, the grinding apparatus, she is even more intrigued with Vermeer, coming to fall in love with him actually, and then there's a problem in the whole thing. There's actually two problems. Vermeer seems to be jealous of Peter, the butcher's son, who comes around to see Greet quite often. We haven't really dwelled on that particular thing. And then one of his best patrons, Van Riegwin, he's always painting his wife, but Van Riegwin had one painting done with a kitchen maid wearing his wife's gown, drinking red wine, and that kitchen maid wound up pregnant and out of a job. And now he wants a painting done with Greet in it. And Vermeer refuses to have her part of an ensemble painting like the concert. So he decides, he promises Van Riegwin that he will do a single portrait of Greet alone. And this is where we left off. Greet was sitting in the studio. She was looking out the window. He said, "Look at me." She's now looking over one shoulder. He had her put a blue scarf around her head, a yellow turban above that, a part of which fell onto her shoulder. We're going to come back and look at this again. And she is now sitting in the studio facing him, ready to be painted. Now, we did 31. This is where we stopped. This is the pose getting set. Vermeer asks Greet to wet her lips and part them slightly and to make an arrangement to pierce her own ear. And we said that Vermeer was the subject, asks was the verb, it was a main clause, it was a simple sentence, and this bizarre request on his part that she would have to pierce her own ear. And she doesn't own any earrings, you'll have to remember that too. So on 32, she buys a small bottle of imported clove oil from the apothecary to dull the pain, and with a sewing needle pierces her left ear, bringing about a throbbing pain and a red, swollen, and infected ear. Jessica, where's your subject? Jessica's the one person I don't see. Kim, where's the subject?
She
And how about the verb?
buys.
And what kind of a clause?
Main.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence.
So it's she buys. Poor Greet, nobody even tells her that she should have sterilized that needle. On the afternoon of Greet's 18th birthday, Maria Thin, Vermeer's mother-in-law, places Katerina's two silvery gray pearl earrings shaped like teardrops in one of her hands before sending her up to the studio for the final sitting. Scott, where is your subject?
Maria Thin
How about the verb?
places.
What kind of a clause?
That's a main clause.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
So it's going to be Maria Thin. And think about the content of what we're reading here. Maria Thin is Katerina's mother. And she knows that her daughter would never allow those earrings out of her sight. But she wants Vermeer to make a painting that's going to bring in some money, thank you, because she's paying all the bills, such as they are, or to the best of her extent. And so she loans her daughter's earrings without permission to Greet for use in that portrait. At Greet's request, Vermeer himself guides the earring through her swollen earlobe and with his fingers gently caresses her neck and the side of her face before wiping the tears from her eyes and running his thumb across her tear-stained lower lip. What do you think, Jeff? Where's the subject?
Vermeer?
And how about the verb?
Guides?
Guides. Is there another verb?
Um,
And let that go. What kind of a clause are we looking at?
Main clause?
Big picture. What kind of a sentence is it?
A simple sentence?
And Elbelin, do you happen to see another verb?
No.
Maybe there isn't one there. Do you see one, Ben?
Caresses.
I see caresses.
Yeah.
So I see guides and caresses. So that would be guides / caresses. Actually, she's punishing him in a way. She doesn't want to wear those earrings, or rather at this point it's one earring. And he's insisting that she put that earring in her ear, and so she wants him to see that it is swollen. She's been hiding it under that white cap that she wears, but now of course it's exposed, and she wants him to see that. And he asks her, of all things, to pierce the other ear, and she objects, saying, "Why would you want the other ear pierced? You're only going to paint me with one earring showing." But as an artist, the picture has to be complete, even if you, the viewer, can't see the other earring. It isn't going to feel right to him to paint that one earring unless the other ear is pierced as well. So, after piercing the other ear, right then and there, with a dab of clove oil to dull the pain, Greet is asked to put on the earring for the other ear. Pharaoh, where's your subject?
Greet
Greet. And where's your verb?
is asked to put on.
Okay, now I want to just object to a little piece of that, but I'll come back and object to it in a minute. What kind of a clause is it?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
All right, now good and loud. Tell me what that verb is again. Is asked?
Asked to put on.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. Well, I have a question. I on, you on, he on, we on. It doesn't seem to be functioning as a verb. Would you look it up in your dictionary? I'm going to call that verb is asked to put. Of course, the problem that the word on presents, we're going to take care of before the day is over. But right now, it remains a problem. So on is it there? It's a
Preposition.
preposition. So mark it P-R-E-P, and in fact, parenthesize on the earring. That would be a throwaway prep phrase. And in that one final sitting, the painting is finished and ready to be delivered to Van Riejwen's household, perhaps on that very day. Amy, where's the subject?
Painting
Painting. Where's the verb?
is finished.
Is finished. Is there any other part of that verb?
Ready. No.
Much louder, Amy.
Ready.
That's it?
Oh, to be delivered.
So what is the whole verb? Is finished,
And ready to be delivered.
ready to be delivered. And what kind of a clause are we looking at?
Main.
It's a main, and what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
It's a simple sentence. So this would be is finished. And this will back up, Maritza, in the same way you were suggesting the other one might back up. Is ready to be delivered. At this point, actually, Greet is kind of sad. Because once that painting leaves Vermeer's household, it's never going to reappear again. Let's take a look at the photograph of the painting that is in the restaurant of the Johannes Vermeer Hotel. This is huge. Down in the foreground, it's what you have on the cover of your book. You can see a table and chairs. This is the restaurant of the hotel named for Vermeer, very close to where he lived, actually, within about 2 blocks or so. And a student painted a mural of Vermeer's work on that wall. Huge, just gargantuan. It envelops the whole space. But you can see the painting. You can see her looking out. You can see the blue head wrap, the yellow scarf hanging, and not a very good look at that earring, but we'll get a better one as we go along. Now, quite unexpectedly, the painting, you know, is still in Vermeer's home. The artist's daughter, Cornelia, no friend to greet, persuades Katerina, now 8 months pregnant, with her 7th child, to climb the stairs in order to enter her father's studio. Scott, where's your subject?
Daughter?
You could take daughter or Cornelia. It's a flip of the coin, either one. I probably would have taken Cornelia, but either one would work. Where is your verb?
Persuades?
Persuades. What kind of a clause do you get?
Main?
And what kind of a sentence do you get?
Simple?
Simple. So either one, take your pick. I'm going to take Cornelia, but it could have been daughter as well. And Shirley persuades is the verb. Now this mother makes it up the staircase to go into her husband's studio where she's never allowed. Shrieking with rage at the sight of her pearl earring worn by Greet in the finished portrait, Katerina accuses her of theft and, grabbing a palette knife, makes an unsuccessful effort to stab the canvas and destroy the artwork. Elbelin, where's the subject?
Katerina
And how about the verb?
accuses.
What kind of a clause?
Main.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple.
So this is a main clause, this is a simple sentence, and here is our verb. Anybody know what a palette knife is? Janice, do you happen to know what a palette knife is?
It's actually like used for painting,
Right.
and then it kind of makes the oil paints or like paints flatter.
When you have a palette knife and you're going to paint something, it tends to look like this with a handle on it. You put the paint on very flat, and you can put it on very thick if you want it thick or thin. So it's a tool for putting paint on a canvas. It's not what you cut, a loaf of bread with or something when you eat dinner. And of course, the artist grabs her wrist just in time to save that painting, or it wouldn't be a painting. Yes, Scott?
Isn't there also another verb
Yeah,
in
I
that
was
one?
going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Another verb? Let's see if we can find one. What did you see?
Makes?
Yeah.
All right. Shrieking with rage at the sight of her pearl earring worn by Greet in the finished portrait. Yes. Katerina accuses her of theft and, grabbing a palette knife, makes. Good eye. An unsuccessful effort to stab the canvas and destroy that artwork. Greet leaves the Vermeer household and goes to stand in the center of the 8-pointed star at the entrance to Market Square before walking along the edge of one of its points and resigning herself to become the wife of Peter, the butcher's son. So, Pippa, where's the subject?
Greet,
And how about the verb?
leaves,
And there's a second verb.
goes to stand.
Goes to stand. And what kind of a clause is that?
Main,
What kind of a sentence is it?
simple.
See, her career working in the Vermeer household ends right at that point. She can never go back. The wife is never going to allow her to set foot in that house. And so where's she going to go? She has to marry the butcher's son. He's been wanting to marry her for a long time anyway. And she likes him, but his fingernails are never clean. They're always coated with blood because he's always cutting up tongues or pig's feet or something. And his apron is never clean. And she would really have hoped somehow magically to have snagged Vermeer, but it didn't happen. By the way, when that movie was proposed to be made initially with Ralph Fiennes as the lead as Vermeer, it was Kate Hudson. Isn't she Goldie Hawn's daughter? Yeah. And she was going to be Greet. And for some reason, who knows what, she backed out of that film assignment. So 10 years go by. 10 years later, she is asked to return to Maria Thinn's home for one last time to receive a gift willed to her at the time of the artist's death 2 months earlier. So she's presumably in her late 20s at this point. Justin, where's your subject?
She
And how about your verb?
is asked to return.
Is asked to return. And what kind of a clause is that?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Okay, so it is asked to return. Right. Let's take a look for a minute at the gravestone of Vermeer's, which is in the Oudkerk, and Oudkerk is Old Church in Dutch. He lived from 1632 to 1675. We said the other day that makes him about 43 years old. And I think that gravestone had to be purchased by the mother-in-law. He certainly couldn't have afforded one. But there it is. So Vermeer's son, Franciscus, recognizes Greet from his father's painting, borrowed from Van Rietveen's daughter at the artist's request for him to look at with thoughts known best to himself just prior to his death. Vince, where's the subject?
Son.
Son. And how about the verb?
Recognizes.
Recognizes. And what kind of a clause is it?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Simple. And when you read that part of the novel, you're led to believe that Vermeer may have been attracted to Greet as well. But that was a romance that never got off the ground. The smooth silver gray pearl earrings with their bright points of white light are placed in her hands by a reluctant widow, Katerina Vermeer. She never wore those earrings again. After that incident, she was all done with the earrings, the wife. Jerry, where's the subject?
I would say the gray pearl earrings.
Nail it to one word.
Earrings.
Definitely earrings. And how about your verb?
Placed in her hands.
It's no, you're going the wrong way.
No?
If
Oh.
you said in her hands, I in her hands, you in her hands, you're going nowhere. So where's that verb? You were in the right spot. You just didn't give me the complete verb.
Are placed in
Are
her
placed.
hands. Okay.
And what kind of a clause is that?
Main.
And what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Wouldn't you think that she'd be delighted to have those earrings, which she would never be able to afford on her own, particularly as the wife of a butcher. She now has 2 sons that she's raising. Now, look at this sentence. All right, Scott, I want your help on this. He asked that you have these. And where's the first subject that you see?
He.
And how about the verb?
Asked.
And what kind of a clause is that?
The main clause.
But I'll bet you see another subject.
You.
And just let me catch up with you. And the verb there.
Have.
So I don't even care what kind of clause that is. What I want you to see is there are 2 clauses. And if it's a subject and a verb and a subject and another verb, one thing you can tell is this couldn't be a simple sentence. Is that true? It's going to turn out to be a complex sentence, but certainly it can't be simple. If that had been rewritten, and it could have been rewritten, maybe should have been rewritten as a simple sentence, it would look like this. He wanted you to have these. Now, I want to demonstrate something here. Before I go any further, Scott, once again, what's the subject now?
He.
And how about your verb?
Wanted.
And what kind of a clause?
It's a main clause.
This is going to be a main clause, and what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
A simple sentence. And I want to talk to you about something regarding quotes. I want you to look again momentarily at the original quote. And the original quote says, he asked that you have these. When you're modifying a quote, and I modified it, I changed the words radically, you put your change in brackets, both wanted and to. And that tells you as a reader instantly, yes, it's part of an original quote, but some modifications have been made here. And they have been made. Let's take a look and see what Greet does with those earrings. Greet takes the earrings to a pawn shop, receives 20 guilders for them, and gives 15 of them to her husband Peter to settle a long overdue debt for meat purchased by the Vermeer family more than a decade ago. So Maritza, what would you say is the subject?
Break.
How about the verb?
Takes.
And there's another verb,
And give.
gives. And what kind of a clause is that?
A main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
Okay. Anybody with a question? Yes? Okay, Justin, go ahead.
Wouldn't receives be a verb as well? Yeah.
Let's see if we missed one. We did indeed. Vince, were you going to tell me the same thing?
Yeah.
Yvonne, were you going to tell me the same thing? You people ought to make 100% on this quiz. You should have no errors whatsoever. Anybody with a question? Okay. With Vermeer's death, there is an end to thoughts about fur-trimmed satin mantles. That's a cloak. A mantle is a cloak. And earrings worn by ladies, as well as the desire to look at paintings of beautiful women trapped in the artist's world. All right, this is going to be a tricky one, Yvonne. I want to look for a verb.
Yes.
And I want to get a V above it, and I want to put a box around there and a check above it, because this is a watch-out word. Where's your subject?
I said end.
End. So, an end to thoughts is there. What kind of a clause does that give us?
Main clause.
And what kind of a
A
sentence?
simple sentence.
So it's is for the verb and end for the subject. Question? Okay. One more to look at. And with 5 guilders hidden away, never to be seen or spent, are memories of grinding colored pigments, feeling the warmth of Master Vermeer's body while working at his side, and gazing into his soft gray eyes ignited by an unspoken passion preserved forever in his painting called Girl with a Pearl Earring. Ben, find a subject for me here.
Memories?
Yes, it is. And what about your verb?
Preserved?
Well, I'm going to buy that subject. I'm going to buy that for starters. You said preserved. I'm looking for that. Preserved forever in his painting. I'm going to call that a half verb.
Ouch.
If this sentence read this way, capital M, imagine it, memories preserved forever in his painting called Girl with a Pearl Earring, you'd have a fragment and not a sentence. You would not have a sentence. Janice, do you see a verb that goes with memories?
Hidden.
I'm going to take that one next. Hidden away, never to be seen or spent. And I'm going to call that a half verb construction, at least. I'm going to call that. You know what the problem is here, Scott? Do you know where that verb is?
Yeah, it's are.
This is an inverted clause, and guess what? It came up with absolutely no warning. And I told you that can happen. I told you that quite often, here and there, will prompt an inverted clause, but not always. We'll get a full screen on that so that we can see what the subject and verb components are. I wonder if, Justin, you can turn at least a piece of that clause around so we can see how it would have read if it had been written in normal word order.
The hidden away, never to be seen again part?
No, you're going to start with the subject.
Oh, okay. Memories are hidden away, never to be seen or spent?
Well, that takes a piece of it. I would have handled it a different way. How would you have gone, Scott? Let's see. What would you have said?
I put memories of grinding colored pigments, feeling the warmth of Master Vermeer's body while working at his side and gazing into his soft gray eyes ignited at an unspoken passion, preserved forever in the painting called Girl with a Pearl Earring, and with 5 guilders hidden away never to be spent.
No, I agree with you all the way down to girl with a pearl earring, but I think your verb has to be picked up there. I agree with your
that's
start.
right.
So do it again. Just try it one more time. Memories?
Memories of grinding colored pigments, feeling the warmth of Master Vermeer's body while working at his side and gazing into his soft gray eyes, ignited by an unspoken passion, preserved forever in his painting called Girl with a Pearl Earring, are.
Go ahead, because this
Are
is going to
hidden-
reveal something.
I'm kind of stuck.
If I take this away, you won't be stuck.
Oh, are hidden away, never to be seen or spent, and with 5 guilders.
Well, and with 5 guilders, memories. You see how complicated you would pick it up there?
Yeah.
And then we see that what we were worrying about is really part of that main verb. I'm going to strip a lot of that out and make it clearer for you. I'm going to strip it out and work with a colored highlighter here. And with 5 guilders, memories are hidden away, never to be seen or spent. That 5 guilders needs to be shuffled around a little bit too, but do you see what I'm saying? So that wasn't even part of a verb phrase. That was sort of a not revealed part of the main clause verb. And this is, in fact, a main clause, right? And it's also a simple sentence. I think one of the things that you're going to find out, now that you understand how to analyze sentence structure, is that your own writing, if you're just writing, and you go back and analyze it, can get quite complicated without hardly any effort on your part. But you should be able to analyze it and see what it is that you did. So that's really it on this simple sentence. Yes, Scott?
Back on sentence number 36 on page 65.
Go ahead, you can ask that question. I'll find it while you're asking.
I'm just curious, why is the word ready part of the verb? It
Oh.
doesn't work in a verb check unless you add the verb word is ready.
And so you have is.
Okay, so,
You have is finished, is ready to be delivered.
so that's how you
Carries
run
over to
it.
both F verbs.
That's how you run it through the verb check, the word ready, you add the word is ready, and then you use the verb check, so it works, so that's a valid verb.
Right. You've got a half verb here, you've got a half verb here, you've got another half verb here, this verb here, and it all flows together with is. That last sentence was probably the trickiest one that we looked at of the whole lot, the very last one. Anybody with a question? Well, I pronounce you ready for a test. Yes, Pippa?
Number 40 on page 67.
Okay, go ahead and start that, and I'll find number 40 in just a second.
Well, the sentence 10 years later, she is asked to return to Maria Thin's home for one last time to receive a gift willed to her, blah, blah, blah. The subject is she. The verb is asked to return. But can it also be to receive?
Yes, exactly. And your is would pull it over on both.
But I thought to receive a gift is going to be the infinitive phrase.
Well, again, there's two ways to see this, and the big picture I want you to see without getting really hung up on minutia is that you got a main clause. But this is very similar to the one that Scott was just asking about, because is asked to receive. She is asked to return to Maria Thin's home for one last time. She is asked to receive a gift. And if you want to see this and say, yeah, I want to see that as an infinitive phrase, fine. Either way, fine. Because the big picture is that you got a main clause, you got a simple sentence. I'll buy that. Okay. Well, I actually have some extra practice, and if we wind up with some time, we'll go through it on the simple sentence. But right now, what I really want to do is to give you instructions on it. So if you could go to laying out the text, and you could go to pages 145 for starters. What we're actually going to look at is page 145, and then we're going to take a look in a few minutes later at 147 and 148 on how to fill out your cover sheet on page 147, because you will staple that to quiz number 1 before you turn in the test for a grade. And this is a really gentle, easy quiz. I want to give you some notations that I'd like you to follow on typing requirements for the exam before we start. But this is just meant to be a very quick confirmation. I get it. Because if you can write 10 simple sentences on a topic I assign free of grammatical error, you could write 1,000. You know you have control over the simple sentence. And if you can't, you know there's something you need to work on. Look at the instructions on page 145. They start here. It says, each of the following exams is designed to test your ability to write controlled examples of each of the major sentence types. And then it says, under number 1 on each instruction sheet, you'll find the letters A and B. And on the day of the exam for a particular sentence type, you'll have 2 separate categories to choose from, always broad, always something that I know you're going to know something about. And so you're going to write the information down on the cover sheet, and you're going to select just one of the given categories, only one, and write all 10 examples on that subject only. This is a listening test in a way. Don't go your own way. Sentences written on any other category or on mixed categories will be given a grade of F. So be sure, people, that you track and label your clauses accurately. I'm not going to look at that. It just offers you a visual check on what you're doing. And you can mark that with a pen once you finish typing the test. You can throw a line under the subject and 2 under the verb and mark it M-1 if you stake your grade on that, and SS if you say it's a simple sentence. But if you were given 2 categories to choose from, and one of them was your favorite hobby, and another one was your favorite television show, and you decide you're going to write on what you're going to do this weekend, it's a guaranteed F, even if your sentences are all correct. And if it's hobby and something else, your favorite television show, you can't do 5 on your hobbies, because the other 5 on your favorite television show won't be counted. So pick one category or the other and stick to that. And if it happens to be your favorite television show and you want to talk about Friends, then all your examples can be on Friends. Make sure they're different. Or they could be one on Friends and one on some other show you like. Will and Grace is another show that's out there. It doesn't matter. That's your choice. So whatever the category. And don't do this, please, because you won't get credit for it. Let's say you're going to write on your favorite television show. Let's say I gave you that as a topic. And you said, what is my favorite television show? And that would be example number 1. You wouldn't want to make example number 2. You would not want to make it, my favorite television show is what? Because if you take a question and you turn it into a statement, the words are still the same. You're only going to get credit for one of those. Do you understand what I'm saying? So 10 different examples. Just a real easy, short quiz. So if you go to page 147, where you're going to see instructions for filling out the cover sheet for this quiz on the simple sentence, it asks you to print your name, the course, the hour, and the date in ink. And then to fill in the A and B blanks with those 2 categories that will be sent to you on the listserv. And on number 2, you'll write out the category you selected, and you'll do the test. So your test, in fact, is going to look like this. You'll have your name, you'll have your course, you'll have the date. You'll title this quiz number 1, the simple sentence, and you'll number in the left-hand column. Don't turn it into a paragraph. Keep your sentences separate. Definitely double space your examples. On page 148, the typing requirements. When you type your exam, you want to use a size 14 font. Please number your examples on the left-hand side from 1 to 10. Also double space. There's a reason for that. If an instructor wants to make comments on what you're doing, good or bad, and you have everything single space and jammed up together, there's no room to write. And if you can, I'd like you to use justified text. I remind you, you have 4 boxes to choose from on your title bar, and the first one is a line left, and the next one is center, and then you get a line right, and it's this last one that spreads your words out and makes your margins even. And if you can, that's the one I'd like you to use. I'm asking you, proofread very carefully. I read each paper that you write at least twice. Do eliminate all spelling and grammatical errors. If you were given a topic of writing about your favorite movie performer and you decided you were going to write on Arnold Schwarzenegger, be sure you know how to spell the man's name. When you finish your test, track your clauses. And at this point, we're putting a line under each subject, 2 under each verb. And although 8 says label the types of clauses you are presenting, hopefully you're only going to have for each example M-1 because you're writing the simple sentence. But it will give you a visual check on the major sentence type you were asked to focus on. And I would do number 9, I would star it. Before you submit that test for a grade, read it out loud to a wall. Now, I don't know what happens, but when you read silently to yourself, and it's true of me, errors can go flying by and your eye doesn't catch it. The moment you read it out loud, it's a whoa. So try reading it out loud, by the way, with no Led Zeppelin playing in the background, a quiet room. And then staple the cover sheet to your finished paper and submit it for a grade. Now, the information to place on your cover sheet will be sent to you on a listserv memo. So you'll want to refer to that listserv memo for the due date for that quiz on the simple sentence.
Question?
Question.
On the first instruction on page 145, what do you mean controlled examples?
Well, if you're asked to write simple sentences and you pop up with a complex, that's not control.
You want us to demonstrate that we know how to...
Only simple sentences and nothing else. If something else gets in there by mistake, such as a compound sentence, a complex sentence, a compound complex, which we haven't formally reviewed, it's definitely going to be wrong. Because on your heading on the paper that you type, you're telling me, when you start to type, that quiz number 1 is going to be exclusively on the simple sentence. So anything else is going to be wrong.
And you don't have control.
And you don't have control, absolutely. And if you're trying to write Arnold Schwarzenegger and you can't spell his name right, that's another kind of no control. Vince?
How you know the categories?
Because it's going to be emailed to you on a listserv memo, and the due date will be emailed to you by your instructor on a listserv memo as well. Okay? So I want to switch gears completely, and I want to go back to the palette book, and I want to go to page 71, and I want to start to take a look at the phrase. And at the moment, any phrase. Because even though there are 4 different types of phrases that we're going to master in this review session, we're going to take them one at a time, and they all answer to this particular definition. Note that a phrase differs from a clause. This is the broad definition. It does not contain a complete subject and a complete verb. You remember that a clause, regardless of type, always has a complete subject and a complete verb. But a phrase does not. It's always missing something. So if you go to page 71, highlight this. It may have a complete subject and no verb. So here's an example to look at in Vermeer's painting of the girl with the pearl earring, a young girl on the verge of womanhood. What would you say, Pippa, is the subject?
Girl.
You'd be wrong. Yvonne, oh, no, you wouldn't.
It's
you
in-
would not. I'm looking at Vermeer's painting, and you are absolutely right. So this is a subject, and is this a sentence?
It's a phrase.
So it's a phrase and not a sentence, which means it's a fragment. I'm going to mark it this way. I'm going to mark it F-R-A-G, short for fragment. We have a complete subject. We have no verb. And it looks like this. Subject, right? But no verb. Highlight this next. It may have no subject and a complete verb. Is seen with a white collar on top of her light brown jacket, a blue head wrap, and a yellow turban with a blue border at its hemline on top of her head. Well, you can see because it's marked that is seen is a verb. Unfortunately, there isn't any subject. So this is going to be a frag as well, fragment. And this time it looks like this. No subject, but potentially a complete verb. Highlight this. A phrase could have a complete subject and a half verb. So this time you have, and her lips slightly parted. I know you probably could read that in such a way that you say, I want to call that a whole verb. But I'm calling it a half verb. And if I decide to call it a half verb, you remember those ed endings can go either way, then this turns out to be a fragment as well. And it looks like this, complete subject and a half verb. In the next one, highlight this. It may have no subject and a half verb. You get this, hinting at a possible desire on her part to tell the world. Well, there is no subject whatsoever. You do have two half verbs, and it would look like this, no subject and a half verb and another half verb, but it produces a fragment because, again, even though in math a half and a half makes a whole, in English a half and a half is still a half. And finally, a phrase could have no subject and no verb. There is no subject, no verb. It would look like this, no subject, no verb. Of course, it would be a fragment, and it would turn out to be a prepositional phrase fragment because there are two prepositional phrases. Now, we just looked at a series of 5 fragments. Those are deadly errors. That's one of the 2 major errors in writing you want to eliminate completely. The other one, of course, is the run-on sentence, and we haven't come up to that yet. We'll come back to that in a minute. I want you to look on page 73 at this. And I want you to memorize a couple of diagrams here. A phrase versus a clause. Well, this is the first thing to highlight right here. A phrase is a group of words, as we said a minute ago, that does not contain a complete subject and a complete verb. And to see the difference between a clause of any kind and a phrase of any kind, look at the following diagrams and then memorize them. So this is the picture of a clause. We've been using it with the simple sentence, but it's going to answer to any clause. Any clause always has a complete subject and a complete verb. And if you look down either column, you see that exact picture. You could only have one subject and one verb, or in the case of a command, your subject could be implied. You could have more than one subject, more than one verb, any variation of that, and your clause could also be inverted. You could have the verb coming before the subject. We saw a couple of examples of that today. But when you look at the picture of a phrase, it's a very different picture. It's always missing something, as we just saw. It could have a complete subject, but no verb, or no subject and a complete verb, or a complete subject and a half verb, or no subject and a half verb. And this last one, no subject and no verb. This is the classic pattern for a prepositional phrase. The classic pattern has no subject and no verb. Okay? On page 74, I would memorize those 2 diagrams, by the way. I certainly would memorize the diagram. You don't need the words. You need to memorize these 2 things. Let me back up just half a second. You need to memorize this picture right here. This picture of a clause, this part. And you need to memorize this picture of a phrase, this part. The wording is obvious, I think. So if you have just those little diagrams memorized, you're fine. On page 74, it says this. A fragment is less than one main clause. And then it says the 5 preceding examples contain 5 fragments. And the problem, imagine that, can be eliminated by combining them into one unit and revising the punctuation. Now, I want to back up again for just a second, and I want to find those 5 examples. And I want to show you, if this were freshman composition in a class that I was teaching, and I saw 5 major errors like this, and your paper was 8 pages long, typed, very nice, good content, developing a style, you'd be down to a C in mechanics. Here's the first fragment. In Vermeer's painting of the girl with the pearl earring, a young girl on the verge of womanhood is seen with a white collar on top of her light brown jacket, a blue head wrap, and a yellow turban with a blue border at its hemline on top of her head, and her lips slightly parted, hinting at a possible desire on her part to tell the world about her unspoken love for the artist. Well, to eliminate those 5 fragment errors, you just lift all the periods and revise your punctuation. So now it's going to look like this. It's going to look like what we have on page 74. In Vermeer's painting of the girl with the pearl earring, a young girl on the verge of womanhood is seen with a white collar on top of her light brown jacket, a blue head wrap, and a yellow turban with a blue border at its hemline on top of her head, and her lips slightly parted, hinting at a possible desire on her part to tell the world about her unspoken love for the artist. Well, Pippa, let's go back again and pick up the subject.
Girl
And where is the verb that's going to go with that?
is seen.
And that whole thing, what kind of a clause are we going to call it?
Main clause.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple.
And if we knew more about prepositional phrases, you'd find out that probably 80% of what's left is prepositional phrase modification. In fact, that sentence could be streamlined, and all we have to say is a young girl is seen. Can you see that? You could put a period after seen. You could throw out everything that follows. You can throw out everything that's in between girl and is seen, and surely everything that goes before. That sentence hangs on that main clause. The rest of it is all modification. Somebody with an untrained eye might look at something like that and call it a paragraph. You know better. It's a sentence, one main clause that stands alone. So in that revised example, Pippa said, let's just take a little look at this for a minute, that the subject was girl, that the verb was is seen, fill that in if you would, that you had just one main clause, and as a result, you had a simple sentence. So you can't determine the kind of sentence you're looking at by the length. You have to determine it by the number and type of clauses they contain, and I would ask you to highlight that and remind yourself to memorize it. All sentences without exception are determined by the number and type of clauses they contain. I want you to look at another image now of Vermeer's painting, and this is a remarkable one. It could have been shot with a much better camera than the one I had, but this is an image of Delftware from the porcelain factory that's been producing porcelain from the time that Vermeer was painting in the 1650s. This would have been the factory where Franz, Griet's brother, was apprenticed, doing nothing more as an apprentice than putting tiles into the oven and taking them out again. A painting like this, very, very beautiful, done in tile exclusively, is about $800 or $900. Interesting only in the fact that, remember, the painters who sold original paintings at the time were lucky if they got $8.91. Maybe if it was really an exceptional portrait, such as I think that one was, $200. But now they're made in Delftware, and we have some really gorgeous ones to look at later on in the lecture. They did a redo of Rembrandt's Night Watch, which is the prize piece in the Rijksmuseum in Holland, and they did it all in Delft tiles, and it's stunning. It covers a whole wall. So they are artists too, at recreating some of these masterpieces. Well, now, on page 75, if you would, memory time, the first thing you have to define and memorize, add to your grammar cassette tape, would be this definition of a prepositional phrase. Know this by heart. A prepositional phrase begins with a preposition and it ends with a noun or pronoun object. This is the standard prepositional phrase that we're talking about. That's a definition. I would circle that, I would highlight it, I would memorize that. And the next thing on page 75 that I would highlight and memorize is the function. Prepositional phrases are modifiers, and this is what they do. They provide extra information in a sentence, and they answer one of these 6 questions, and you've got to memorize those 6 questions. There's just no shortcut to it. Who, how, when, where, why, and what. So 2 really important pieces of information went by that I hold you to memorize instantly. The definition of a prepositional phrase: it starts with a preposition, it ends with a noun or pronoun object. Well, what do? They add extra information. And how is that? By answering one of those 6 questions that have to race through your head like a film strip. Who, how, where, when, why, what. Now look at this particular sentence. It's on page 75 in your book. Johannes Vermeer painted. You have a complete subject, you have a complete verb. It's going to form a main clause and obviously a simple sentence. Amy, the subject is what?
Johannes Vermeer.
Johannes Vermeer, and the verb is?
Painted.
So, we have very few words. We have a simple sentence that quite easily stands alone. The problem is you don't know much about Vermeer, and if I want to tell you more about his own painting technique, how he painted, well, one simple way to do it is to add prepositional phrases, and those prepositional phrases added onto that initial main clause can answer a wide variety of questions. Here's the example that you have in your book, and I spread it out so we can mark it more easily. Let's just look at the whole sentence. Just let me read it to you once for free. Due to the artist's desire for very realistic detail in his artwork, Johannes Vermeer painted images with the aid of a device called a camera obscura to look closely at the exact texture of an ordinary item like a partially eaten bread roll left over from a recent meal. Vince, where's my subject?
Johannes Vermeer.
Right, and where's my verb?
Painted.
And what kind of a clause? We'll get the big picture.
Main.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple.
Now, in terms of prepositional phrases, this has been made very easy for you because I put in parentheses every phrase you see. So I just want to concentrate on the function. Due to the artist's desire, Pippa answers what question? And that's why. Who? No. No, don't guess. Stop, freeze. That's why you have to have these 6 questions memorized like a film strip. They've just got to go rolling through your mind. Who, how, where, when, why, what. Because otherwise you're going to stumble. And what you look at for a clue is the object of the phrase. Scott, due to the artist's desire, is going to answer
What?
and nothing else. Put a what right above that in your book if you would. Some of these prep phrases we're going to see could answer to 1 or more questions, and some could only be 1, and there's a case in point where what is going to be the only correct answer. When you're trying to figure out what questions a prep phrase answers, your easiest way to go is to back into that phrase. So, due to the artist's desire, what? Jerry, for very realistic detail, that answers?
How?
No, I don't get a how about that at all. Maritza, let's try it again. Due to what? Due to the artist's desire for very realistic detail.
For what?
It's only going to be what? Look how you can tell. Due to what? Due to the artist's desire. For what? For very realistic detail. In his artwork, Yvonne.
Oh. What is it? What?
What?
I'm sorry.
Johannes Vermeer painted images, Janice, with the aid.
What?
Or, you're right, what or? Yes, how? Exactly. There's a case where that prep phrase could have been answered accurately by either of those 2 questions. Vince, of a device. Only one answer is going to work here.
What?
What? Called a camera obscura to look closely, Farah, at the exact texture.
What?
What? Jeff, of an ordinary item.
What?
Like a partially eaten bread roll. That's what I want, Kim.
What?
That's going to be a what? left over, Amy, from a recent meal?
What?
What? How many prep phrases do you have in that sentence?
9.
How many did you get?
9.
9. Before we go any further, take a look at this particular detail of a painting from The Milkmaid. And this actually, Vermeer painted this painting from, using Tonica probably as his model. She really was a servant in the home, and he really did paint a painting of her pouring milk into a pitcher. We'll take a look at that image. This is just a detail. We'll see the whole painting at a later point. If you could look at that painting, and I did, it's the size of a piece of notebook paper, 8.5 by 11 inches. It's not much bigger than that. That bread is so realistically painted, you feel like you could reach into the canvas and eat it. It's in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, in Holland. Totally realistic. Every little indentation in that doesn't show up at all on a slide. I apologize for that. But if you saw the real painting, you'd be riveted to look at it until somebody moved you away. Incredible, photographically realistic detail. You must have spent weeks on it. A reminder on page 76, if you would. A sentence is determined by the number and type of clauses it contains. Yvonne was right. If you have one main clause plus 9 prepositional phrases, what do you wind up with? A simple sentence. Because a sentence is determined by the number and type of clauses it contains, certainly not by phrases of any kind. Who's got a question? Well, let's do a little bit more with memory work. Let's just jumpstart the memory work business. On page 77, it says this. You have some common single word prepositions here. Here's a partial list of common prepositions that will be useful to you in identifying common modifying phrases. I would draw a box around partial list after you get through highlighting that, because it's going to look to you like all the prepositions in the world. It's not. It's a partial list. And this core list I want memorized solid. And I want it memorized solid before the next lecture. You've got to have these in your mind. It doesn't do anybody any good to tell you that a prepositional phrase starts with a preposition unless you know the prepositions, because they're not going to jump off the page and say, hi, we've seen that enough times already. I'm a preposition and I'm part of a prepositional phrase. It's not going to happen. And that's 75% of the bad news. I say 75% because I asked you to memorize the definition. I asked you to memorize the function. I asked you to memorize the single word prepositions, and I have one more request. On page 78, you have a partial list again, if you would box that off, of group prepositions that also function in modifying phrases. And of course, I want those memorized, recital ready as well. The difference between a single word preposition and a group preposition is simply this. A group preposition, quite obviously, has a preposition that consists of more than one word. But I think the single word prepositions are actually more difficult to memorize than the group ones, because if on the single word prepositions you know that the word to, let's just take to for a minute, can be a preposition, then doesn't common sense tell you that any variation of to is likely to be a group preposition? So you're going to get things like according to, contrary to, due to, and there are more. I mean, we have more prepositions. I didn't show you all the group prepositions just yet. Here's another one in addition to. If you know on the single word prepositions that the word of can be a preposition, then doesn't it make sense to you that any variation of is likely to be a group preposition? So you get things like ahead of, because of, by means of, by way of, going on to the last of the group prepositions that you have in your text. Look at this. In spite of, instead of, on account of, out of, and you're more than halfway there. So I think the struggle is going to be with the single word prepositions rather than the group prepositions. And we will talk about some memory systems that help you get this kind of information down rather easily, but I want it in your heads forever by the time we have the next lecture. Anybody with a burning question? And I don't want you to feel sorry for yourself, because if we were taking Spanish 1, you'd get vocabulary like that on a daily basis, wouldn't you? Or you'd never get any further than Buenos dias, señora. You'll remember that I want you to memorize the definition, the function, the single word prepositions, the group prepositions. I can't give you a memory prompt really for the definition and the function, but I can for the prepositions, which is a series of words. So on page 79 to 80, I want to talk to you about developing a memory system that's going to work for this class, but really any class where you have a lot of facts that you need to get in your mind. The first one, option A, I like this one a lot, it works for me, is to consider an actor's secret and make yourself a cue card or a cheat sheet. Now, I have the feeling that most professional actors can learn lines very, very, very quickly, and they use this method, maybe not the cheat sheet, but they use this method that we're going to set up. What I would like you to have is a 3 by 5 inch card because it's small, you can carry it around with you very easily, and what I want you to do with that is to put a heading on one side that says prepositions, and on the other side a heading that says group prepositions. And I'm going to imagine that this is a 3 by 5 card. So on one side I would head it prepositions, and on the other side, starting tomorrow, I would head it group prepositions. That's the first thing. And then looking at the single word prepositions, because you would want to tackle those first, you can't help but notice that they're arranged alphabetically from A to W. In this case, in vertical columns, right? It goes from about down to behind, or however it's going in your book, it's going to be in vertical columns. I think you have 3 instead of the 4 I'm looking at. So you would take your cheat sheet and you would say there are some prepositions that begin with the letter A and some that begin with the letter B, some with D, some with E, some with F, some with I, L, and so on until you get to W way over here on the end. That would be the next step. So I just made for you vertical columns for each letter that contains prepositions. And then the next thing I would do would be to go back to the prepositions that begin with the letter A and I'd count them. And I would do the same for the letter B. So if I look at this master list, I see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 begin with A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 begin with a B. And I would just fill in and say, okay, 10 with an A, and 9 with a B, and I'd get all the way down here to 3 with a W. Now that's your cheat sheet. And once you have that worked out, here's the next step. You read the words on the single word preposition list in little 5-minute pockets of time that I think all of you have during the day. I still think of myself as one of the busiest people I know. I have an incredible number of 5-minute pockets of time during the day. But the important part, God bless you, is to read before you go to sleep at night the list of single word prepositions over. Even if you're yawning, read them over, turn out the light, go to sleep. This is where the actor's secret comes in, because what happens when you're learning lines is if you read them and go to sleep, you wake up in the morning and you know an awful lot of lines. Oh yes, you would if you were an actor, Jerry, and that's true. Somebody like Robin Williams, Juilliard graduate, I assure you, if you put a play in front of him and said, Mr. Williams, we want to do Hamlet, we'd like to have you play this for the college and we'd like Act 1 ready to block tomorrow, he'd get those lines down, no problem. And surely the final polishing memorization would take place at night just before he went to sleep, because what happens is whatever you're thinking about when you go to sleep, your mind will process. So if you're thinking about prepositions, your mind keeps working those over and over while you're sleeping, and the next morning it's time to close the book and work with a cheat sheet, and I'll show you how I would handle that. But the idea is, if you've ever tried this, and I try it all the time, I'm a great one for forgetting things. If I can't remember where I put my car keys, if I can't remember where a certain book is, and it's really frustrating me, or the name of a particular actress, and I take a nap and I'm thinking about it, when I wake up, almost always, I have a solution on how to pay the PG&E bill. I can remember where I put that book I couldn't find. So I want you to try that. It works for me. And you'd have the cheat sheet out the next morning in front of you, and you would know that there are 10 prepositions that begin with the letter A. So you just start writing and keep yourself, I'm just not even worrying here. I'm just going to write down a few of them. But don't do this. Oh yeah, there's one that is a U. And then there was another one here with after. and then there was like, and then there was against. Don't do that. Keep yourself in an alphabetical continuum. When you run out of A's, just look at your cheat sheet. You know that there are 9 that start with a B. Write down the ones you can. And then the next step after that will be to mark the ones you missed. So you're going to write out all the prepositions you can think of that begin with the letter A. You're going to go on to the letter B, and you're not going to skip in the alphabet. In fact, I wouldn't even skip within the same letter. If you do things like about, above, across, at, after, around, you're going to lose some of those A's too. So keep yourself in an alphabetical mode, and when you run out of A's, then you go on to the letter B, on to the letter D, E, and you repeat that same process when you start to memorize the group prepositions. Now, this would work for a history course. It would work for any kind of a class. In fact, it would work for the Spanish class we were talking about. Any kind of vocabulary, if you work at it at night before you go to sleep, a lot of it's down there by the time you wake up. But here's the sad thing, and it really is true. People do tend to forget up to 86% of what they have learned in 2 weeks. Isn't that shocking? If newly processed information isn't constantly being reinforced. And I've proved that with myself. I keep thinking that because I have a good memory, that couldn't possibly happen to me. But when I was taking at this college a course in Renaissance art history, ending up with a grade of about 104% and thinking I had that down, and going the next semester into Egyptian art history and having a free hour so that I could walk into an art history lecture on Renaissance art, I was shocked. I could recognize a Lamentation with Christ, but I couldn't tell you if Simone Martini painted it or Giotto painted it, because that goes away, that little fine point distinction, unless you're reviewing constantly. If you do review constantly, by the end of the quarter, you'll have this down forever. The other way, and it's not an either A or an option B kind of thing, you can use both, but this also works. You read all of the new information, including today, the definition of a phrase versus a clause. Surely the definition and function of a prepositional phrase, the single word prepositions and the group prepositions into a tape recorder. And while you're learning that information, I would read it twice. I wouldn't on the definition. I would read for the definition: a prepositional phrase begins with a preposition and ends with a noun or pronoun object. I would read for function at about this pace, by the way. A prepositional phrase adds extra information. It does so by answering these 6 questions: who, how, where, when, what, why. And then on the single word prepositions, I'd give myself a little bit of a prompt, and I'd say single word prepositions, and I would just read them through, not too fast. About, above, across, after. And when I got all the way down to with, within, without, I would do it again while you're learning, because then you can hit the rewind key, listen to them again after you've heard it through twice, and you can hear it through 2 more times, and you won't be doing that too many times before you have these down. And then you can get it back to just 1 reading of the single word prepositions and 1 reading of the group prepositions. And it goes down like a song. And you know what I mean about song. I just recently got a new CD by one of my favorite singers, Bernadette Peters, and I hear a new song, and I don't remember ever hearing that before, and I hear it once, okay, I hear it the second time. Third time, I'm singing with her. Walking around the track in the field singing with Bernadette Peters. Life doesn't get a whole lot better than that. The trick is, of course, you have to listen to that grammar cassette review tape on a very regular basis for the duration of the term if you want that kind of material to stick in your mind forever. There's no shortcut. So I want them down by the next lecture. Anybody with a question? Yes, Scott.
Can I share one more memorization technique?
Sure.
What I do, because I learned visually, is I write down the words in vertical columns, and the writing of them reinforces the memorizing of them. And then I'll fold this over like this so I can't see it, and I'll try to write them down again. And when I get down here, I'll check. And then what I wind up with is rows of prepositions that I've folded over and tested myself as I go through. But that, for me, works.
I like that. I had never thought of that, but that fold-over technique works very well. And if it's ruled paper, it would be real easy to match it up. Good idea. And whatever technique works for you is the one that I want you to use, whatever it is. It's going to be a different technique for some, but I like Scott's. I hadn't heard that one before. That's a good one. I want you to go to page 83, and I want to start analyzing with you the function of prepositional phrases. And we'll look at the following sentence where it's not going to be too difficult because, again, the prepositional phrases have been picked out for you in advance. At least the location of those prep phrases won't be so difficult. Look at what the sentence says. The stark black background behind the young woman pushes her forward into the viewer's space, with the whites of her eyes, the white collar around her neck, and the even brighter reflected white light from the pearl earring serving to pull the viewer into Vermeer's composition to make her seem larger than life. Scott, where's the subject in this?
Background.
Background. Where's the verb?
Pushes.
What kind of a clause is it?
It's main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Now, let's take a look. Ben, let me start with you. The stark black background behind the young woman. That answers. And while he's thinking, notice how I'm backing him into these prepositional phrases, because when you're trying to figure out what question it answers, if you back into it, it's easier to get that answer with the phrase in context. Let's try it again. The stark black background behind the young woman answers.
What?
What?
Where?
I'll buy that. I'll buy either one. Put a what above it, put a slash, put a where. And that black background pushes her forward into the viewer's space, Elbelin.
Where?
Or
What?
what? Yes. With the white, Scott,
With what?
what? Of her eyes, Kim,
What?
what? The white collar around her neck, Jeff.
What?
Or
Where?
where? And the even brighter reflected white light from the pearl earring, Farah.
What?
What? Serving to pull the viewer into Vermeer's composition, Amy.
What?
What or?
Where?
What would the other one be?
Where?
Where? Exactly. Right? Now, again, you're at just a slight bit of a disadvantage if you don't have those 6 questions memorized, because they've got to go rolling through your mind and roll through anew each time you look at one. Jerry, you look like I'm saying this lecture in Spanish. Where am I confusing you?
I was thinking with around her neck, why wouldn't that be whose? 'Cause it'd be
Well,
around
look at
her
the
neck.
object. Is neck a who?
No, it's the young girls.
Oh, but you can only
Young
look at the
woman.
phrase, around her neck.
Right.
So you look at the object of that prep phrase, and it's got to be a what? You're still not convinced.
Carol, on the
Just
B-
before I get that, Maritza, fill in for me, people, and then I'll get Maritza's question that the subject of that sentence was, as Scott told us, background. Just fill it in. This reinforces it, and the verb was pushes. And long as it was, we were looking at a main clause, and we were looking at a simple sentence. Yes, Maritza, go ahead.
On the preposition it said behind the young woman. Is that can answer also to who?
The stark black background behind the young woman. It certainly could be a who, and a who would be a better choice, although we
I
could
thought
use
it was
what
for a
as
better
well,
choice.
because it is a person.
It's a
Yes,
person.
yes.
Okay.
That I would buy a who with, Jerry, but not around her neck, because neck, that's definitely could be a what. Now let's see if I have to undo any bad teaching. Did you know this? Highlight the rule. A sentence can end with a preposition, and sometimes it has to in order to make sense. Was anybody ever taught don't ever end a sentence with a preposition? Were you, Jerry? Okay, but if I asked you to leave the studio and I said, Jerry, go, if I didn't say go out, that sentence is not complete. If I asked you to deal with the lights in the studio and I said, Jerry, turn the light on or turn the light off, doesn't even make any sense, right?
Right.
So a sentence can end with a preposition. If we had a platform in the middle of the room and I wanted you to get up on that platform, I would tell you stand up or step up, but I wouldn't tell you up step. And if I got you on the platform and I wanted you to go down, I wouldn't tell you down step. I would say step down, right? Yvonne has a pencil to write with. If you don't put the with on the end, it doesn't make any sense at all. Yvonne has a pencil to write. And the only way around that, tell me how many people you know who say this, Yvonne has a pencil with which to write. If anybody ever did speak like that, I have never heard anybody speak like that, it's gone with the wind, right? The college library is a quiet place to study unless you're talking about the architectural facade. So definitely you can end a sentence with a prepositional phrase. Take a look at this one. Until the last decade of the past century, many of the admirers of this particular artwork did not have the opportunity to take a trip to Holland to see the original painting and had only the version put out in art books to rely on. And what I want all of you to do is highlight the on at the end. I want you to see that that sentence ends with a preposition. If you take it out, the sentence makes no sense. And by the way, I said preposition. On is not a prepositional phrase, is it? Because it isn't followed by any noun or pronoun. So that tells you something else about prepositions. They don't always come neatly packaged in phrases. Jerry, see if you can find for me, please, the subject.
Admirers?
No. No. And you know what? I'm going to ask you, why not?
Why not the admirers?
Do you see what I did? I put parentheses around of the admirers.
Oh, because
Would you put parentheses around of the admirers? Tell me what that is.
phrase.
What kind of a phrase?
Prep phrase.
And as a matter of fact, since we're at it, what does that question answer? A phrase answer. Many of the admirers.
You lost me, I'm sorry.
That who, what, when, where, why?
What?
Well, are admirers people?
Yes, they are.
So
Who?
probably this would be a who. So where's the subject?
I don't know.
Where's the verb?
I'm really frustrated. I
Pippa,
don't know.
where's
I
the
can't
subject?
Many.
Many.
think.
If many, Pippa, is the subject, where is your verb?
Did have and had.
And had. What kind of a clause are we looking at?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Okay. I agree. Vince, find another prepositional phrase for me in this sentence.
Of this particular artwork.
Of this particular artwork. We don't even need to back that one up. That one is going to answer
What?
what? And Janice, where's another prep phrase?
To take a trip.
No. You picked one that I'm just going to say no on, and I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to highlight this note, and I'm going to ask you to highlight that note and leave it in limbo. It's not a preposition. We'll figure out why in just a little bit. Jeff, can you spot a prep phrase for me?
To Holland?
To Holland, I'll take that. And let me back it up. To take a trip to Holland. And to Holland is going to answer
Where?
where. I'll take that. So that's going to be a where. That's right. Kim, find another one for me.
In art books.
In art books. And in art books, the only version put out in art books is going to answer
What?
what? Possibly where. Ben, another?
To take a trip.
No, you fell asleep on me. To take a trip is not a prep phrase. It wasn't 5 minutes ago. It's not now. Elbelin.
So sorry.
To see.
To see is going to be another one that I'm going to reject, and I'm going to highlight. I'll ask you to do the same. To see the original painting. It's not a prepositional phrase. Maritza?
Until the last decade.
Until the last decade. And until the last decade answers
Until when?
when. That's right. Justin?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're looking for one more
Of the past century?
of the past century. And of the past century is going to answer?
When?
Until the last decade. I almost want to even say that's a when or a what, but how about this? Of the past century. It's not going to be a when. I don't get a when out of it.
Where?
I sure don't get a where. You were closer
What?
with when. It's going to be of what? Until the last decade, when? Of what? Of the past century. Yvonne, did you have a question just now?
Oh, no.
Did anybody have a question just now? All right, well, here's the question. We didn't pick up to see the original painting. We didn't pick up to take a trip. Why not? On page 84, I want you to highlight this. I want you to memorize this. You will trip over it if you don't memorize it. To followed by a noun or pronoun creates a prepositional phrase. So to Holland, the one that Jeff just found, he said that answered where, is going to be prepositional. I agree. But this is the one you're going to trip over, people. Star it and highlight it. Page 84. To, directly followed by a verb plus a noun or pronoun object, creates a verb or infinitive phrase. Right now, verb phrase is fine. So those two phrases that we rejected to take a trip and to see the original painting are not prepositional phrases. How can you tell? To is followed by a verb. It gives us a half verb. So make a note, this is a verb phrase. And in the case of to see the original painting, same story, to see is a half verb. So this would be a verb phrase and not a prepositional one. Do you see what I'm saying? Now let me make that a little bit more confusing. These are prepositional phrases to me, to you, to the movies, to school. These are not to go home, to eat lunch, to drive my car, to take a nap, to read a book, to write a letter. Those would all be verb phrases, right? Because to in each case is followed by a verb. Careful with that, because to can go either way and you will trip if you don't remember that there's a duality with the word to. Anybody with a question? Maritza? Okay. Well, here's the next thing that can come up on page 85. Highlight this. You'll trip on this one too until you develop a trained eye. You can have an implied preposition. That means you can't see it. And in every case, it's going to be the word of. I can't think of any instance where anything other than of will be implied, but this happens all the time. I want you to look at this next example. Track the subject and the verb as I'm reading to you. Just get those right out of your way. Before the painting was restored in 1994, and it's not a simple sentence, all the color reproductions of it show the pearl earring with not one but two reflective spots of white light, with the second one appearing under the larger one over to the right. We don't have a simple sentence here, but we ought to be able to pick out subject-verb combinations in any case. Yvonne, where's the first subject that you see?
Painting
And how about the verb?
was restored.
Okay, so we know that's a clause. It is a clause we haven't started to study yet, but we can surely see that we have a subject here and a verb here. Where's your next subject?
All
And where is your verb?
show
Show. And that kind of clause is
a main clause.
a main clause. So we can't say what kind of a sentence this is, but we surely can see that there are subject-verb combinations going on. I'd like to see if we can locate prepositional phrases in this sentence. Just want to see what we find. Jerry, start me out. Where's the first one that you see?
Of white light?
I'll take of white light. And of white light is going to answer?
What?
Yes, you don't even have to back that one up. Vince, find another one for me.
I'm thinking of in 1994
I'll take in 1994, and that answers
when.
when. Janice, find another. You're thinking too hard. Justin, find another.
For the painting?
Before the painting,
Yeah.
did you say that? Okay, you bring up an important point. Painting, as you see, is a subject. Was restored is a verb. That makes it some kind of a clause. So I want you to parenthesize before the painting, because that would be a logical slip If that was a prepositional phrase, yes, that could possibly be, but not when painting is part of a clause. And I want you to make a note, a brief note. A word acting as an object, so I'm sorry, as a subject, will not be the object of a phrase. It's going to be one or the other, and the subject role is dominant. So if a word acts as a subject in a clause, it will not at the same time be the object of a phrase, in this case, a prepositional phrase, and the subject role is dominant. So that just tells you that before can be more than one thing. It can be a preposition, but it's not one here. Okay? So, Amy, do you see a prepositional phrase?
I want to say under the larger one.
Under the larger one, I'll take that. And under the larger one, with the second one appearing under the larger one, is going to answer
Where?
where or
What?
what. Right, either one would work. Ben, where's another one? You're working too hard. Elbelin, where is one? Scott, where is one?
Over to the right?
Over to the right. With the second one appearing under the larger one, over to the right. And that is going to answer,
Where?
where is the best answer for that? Kim, find me another one. Working too hard. Jeff, find another one.
I can't find it.
See, you're handicapped until you memorize these prepositions. That's my point. Farrah, good and loud, find me another one.
With the second one.
I'll take with the second one. And with the second one is going to answer
What?
what? Maritza, where's another one?
With no one?
Let me just back up on that. All the color
It's on the third line.
reproductions of it show the pearl earring with not one but two reflective spots. Take it all the way down to there.
Okay.
You pick up your noun object. I'll get that in a second, Pippa. What is that answer? Maritza, what's that phrase answer?
With what?
What? Yes, Pippa.
Isn't but also a prepositional?
Yes, but it's also a joining word like and. I guess you could say with not one, but two reflective spots. You could maybe divide that into two, but I'm reading that as but joining this spot and this spot, so I'm reading it as one phrase. Either way, we're going to come out with some what's. We're still missing a tiny one. Who sees it, Scott?
Of it.
Of it. And of it answers?
What?
All right, we got all the easy ones out of the way. There's another one to find. Yes, Maritza.
No, I know the other one.
Where is it?
Of the color reproductions.
So this one over here, the color reproductions, is a prep phrase, but you don't see the prep. You don't see it because the preposition is implied. When it is implied, it's always going to be of. And of the color reproductions, Maritza would answer
Of what?
what? Okay? This could have been written this way. All of the color reproductions of it show. It could have been written that way. But if it's written this way, all the color reproductions, that of is there whether you see it or you don't. Now, we don't have an easy sentence to define here, but we'll take the subject of the main clause because that's where the problems come in. So it's all, and the verb was what? Show? This was the main clause. And that would give us a main clause. This is actually a complex sentence. We're just right around the corner from starting that one. But the tricky part was the implied prepositional phrase, which was of the color reproductions. Okay? Yes, Scott.
Isn't it true that this implied preposition of usually occurs before the word all?
Follows all a lot of the time. but I think it can crop up in other places. I'm unwilling to say it's only going to follow all, but it does a lot of the time. If you say, all the students fell asleep, your subject would be?
All.
And surely not students, and your verb would be?
Fell.
Fell. And it wouldn't be students because?
Because it's of the students.
Of the students, exactly. Yes, a lot of the times it follows all. I'm not quite willing to stake that on 100%. Take a look at the image of Girl with a Pearl Earring as it was before that restoration in what was the year 1994, very recently. Can you see that earring? Can you see there's a white highlight, and then right below that there are two little dots of white? What happened when they were cleaning it was a flake of paint, white paint, stuck to the canvas. Nobody realized it, and so everybody thought that's the way it was painted for a very long time. Now, group prepositions on page 86. A prepositional phrase can begin with a group preposition, and you remember that a group preposition is simply one that has more than one word acting as your preposition. So we're looking at a sentence again where the prepositional phrases are marked for you in advance, those, that is, that start with a group preposition. According to Martin Bailey, in spite of the inaccurate second highlight appearing as a result of the restoration in 1882 because of a flake of paint coming loose from the earring and becoming reattached to the lower part of it quite by chance, due to its identification as a genuine Vermeer, the painting was sold at an auction for 2.5 guilders, an amount of money worth a little more than $1 in today's currency. Can you imagine that? A little bit more than $1, a genuine Vermeer. Scott, where's the subject on this?
Painting?
It's going to be painting. How about the verb?
Was sold?
And the kind of clause?
Main?
The kind of sentence?
Simple.
It's a simple sentence. Let's look at the prepositional phrases that have group prepositions. Farah, according to Martin Bailey, answers?
Who?
Who? Jeff, in spite of the inaccurate second highlight, answers?
What?
What? Appearing as a result of the restoration in 1882 because of a flake, Kim.
What?
What? Of paint coming loose from the earring and becoming reattached to the lower part of it quite by chance, due to its identification, Elbelin.
What?
What? As a genuine Vermeer, the painting was sold at an auction for 2.5 guilders. Now, there are other regular prepositional phrases in that sentence, those that don't start with a group preposition. Justin, find one for me.
Normal.
A regular, just single word preposition. A prepositional phrase that starts with a single word preposition.
Of paint.
I'll take of paint, parenthesize it, and we'll just make a listing of a few. There will be more. Of paint. And of paint answers what question?
What?
What? Okay. I agree. Jerry, find me another one.
I would say as a genuine Vermeer.
As a genuine Vermeer. And that would answer
What?
what? And all of these would be equally valid prepositional phrases. It's just that some of them start with a group preposition and some of them don't. Janice, can you spot one?
As a result.
As a result. I'll take that. And as a result is going to answer
What?
what? Now, one of the suggestions I give to you at this point is that you just, between now and the next lecture, take a paragraph out of something you're going to read and toss, an article in the newspaper, an article in a magazine that appeals to you, and just sit for 10 minutes a day and try to track your prepositional phrases. In fact, subjects and verbs, you have the ability to do that. Even if we're not always looking at a simple sentence, you surely can say, gosh, there are 2 clauses in this sentence. I don't know what to call it, but I can tell I see 2 clauses because there's a subject-verb pattern that repeats. I want to go back to prepositions, but I want to make sure that I give you an assignment before I do that because I want more done by you on prepositional phrases. Of course, first of all, I asked you to memorize the definition of a prepositional phrase. You can see why that's important, to memorize the function of a prepositional phrase. And what I'm speaking of there are those 6 questions that just have to be down like a film strip the single word prepositions and the group prepositions. So then, I want you to go to page 89. And page 89 asks you to do this. It says we're going to practice locating prepositional phrases. And the directions read like this. You're going to underline the subject and verb of each main clause. I'd like you to do that for extra practice. But then I want you to put parentheses around each prepositional phrase. And you remember that the writing process is the important one. Just like that method that Scott was showing us, it's the writing out that gets this material in your mind. So on the lines that follow, I want you to write out every prepositional phrase that you can find. And in the space to the right, pick your best shot at which question a given phrase answers. If we looked at this particular example that's in the book as a sample, you would proceed with it this way. One of the paintings mentioned in Tracy Chevalier's novel is called The Milkmaid. So you would have thrown a line under one, and you would have put 2 lines under is called. Play with the sentence structure first, and you would have said this is a main clause. You would have said this is a simple sentence. Then you would have put parentheses around of the paintings, and you would have said, well, that's clearly a what, so it's of the paintings, and then a what. Mentioned in Tracy Chevalier's novel, you'd have put parentheses around that. I think you would have said that was a what. You could have said it was a where. So you would have put in her novel, you write out the whole thing, and you can put here a what / where. Okay? Now here's a note I have for you to just be aware of. In 16 sentences, that's all you're going to look at, starting on page 89. I'm expecting you to find 59 prepositional phrases. Now, what does that tell you right for a start? Well, each sentence, or several sentences, are likely to have several. We've looked at sentences that have several prepositional phrases. So that's going to happen, and I just want you to be aware of it. Please get that exercise done completely. And on those that you say, well, I'm not sure, those are the ones I want you to do for sure. Work them out with pencil if you need to, so that if you're wrong, we can question it and see where you went wrong. Let's go back to page 87. Here's another rule that you need to highlight. A prepositional phrase is usually not the subject of a sentence. But here is a kind of rare exception that breaks that rule, but it's really not all that rare. I like the example that I use a lot that has nothing to do with Vermeer. If someone like Pippa were to ask me, what's your favorite movie? My answer might very well be, On the Town Is. And I just want you to think about that. She says, what's your favorite movie? And I answer, On the Town Is. Now think about it. On the Town is 4 things. It's the title of a movie. It's the subject of that main clause, of that simple sentence. It's a prepositional phrase, and it answers the question, on the town where? So a prepositional phrase can take subject position, and does quite often, actually. Take a look at this sentence. It's in your book on page 87. Because of the essence of love trapped inside of Greet's eyes for all eternity was heard by one viewer at a recent exhibition with regard to a comment made about the timeless quality of this image brought forth from layers of paint by the hands of a master artist. What, Scott, would you say is the verb? And this is tricky, not the verb.
The verb?
Yeah.
Was heard.
That I think is straightforward. What would you tell me is the subject?
I would say the entire quote.
Read it to me.
Because of the essence of love trapped inside of Greet's eyes for all eternity.
And I wonder what kind of a clause that would give us.
That's an independent clause.
So what kind of a sentence would we have?
Simple sentence.
Now, do you all see that? He's absolutely right. The subject is, I'm going to do a shorthand version, the entire quote. And the verb is, was heard. And that gave us a main clause. It also happened to give us a simple sentence. Now, on those phrases, because of the essence of love inside of Greet's eyes for all eternity, those all make up the comment that was heard by that viewer at an art exhibition. They function collectively as the subject of that sentence. And yet, each of those phrases can be answered by one of those 6 questions. Jeff, because of the essence answers
what?
What? Ben, Of love answers
What?
what? Inside of Greet's eyes, Janice answers,
Who?
look at the object, eyes.
What?
What?
How about where?
Yeah.
I'll take a where. I'll take either one of those. And for all eternity, what would you say about that, Yvonne?
Oh, what?
What?
Isn't that?
So you have a whole series of phrases, and they function, just let me back it up and I'll get the question, as the subject of this sentence. How can you tell? Well, you find the verb, agree with me about was heard, and you ask yourself a question based on that verb. What was heard by one viewer? And what was heard turns out to be, because of the essence of love trapped inside of Greet's eyes for all eternity. Now, who had a question? Yes, Scott.
That last phrase, for all eternity, doesn't that also answer when?
Take a when out of it, too. Yeah, it could go either way. It could be a what, it could be a when. Now, isn't that interesting when you think of the content of her novel, right? We know that Greet probably fell in love, especially if you read the novel, with Vermeer, because she drops that grinding instrument, and later when she's adjusting this headdress, he opens the curtain where she normally changes clothes by accident, and this long red hair that she has is not in a cap, and she always keeps her hair confined behind a cap. And she thinks that loose women have their hair where somebody can see it, and here Vermeer has seen her hair. He might as well have seen her totally undressed, as the story goes. That's what she thinks. That's her impression of it. But then when she walks away that time, after the wife tries to slash the canvas and she never sees Vermeer again, 10 years go by and he dies, the fact that the son tells her that before his death, knowing he was going to die, A, he willed her the earrings that the wife never touched again, and B, that he asked back for that particular painting to look at until he died, well, then you know that he was in love with her too, right? And where they were in their own lives prevented anything from happening further. I want you to take another look at Vermeer's painting once again, and this is how it looked after the restoration. This is how we see it now. There's only one highlight under the ear. Remember, there were two little dots of white under that earring, and now we see it as it was really painted, because there was really only one there. And I think that's a remarkably gorgeous painting. That's my impression of that. Very simple, just a headshot. Now, on page 88, let's do some reviewing. I want you to remember this, people. I don't want you to trip on it. To followed by a noun or pronoun is going to give you a prepositional phrase. In that sentence that we were just looking at, to the lower part, that's a prepositional phrase. With regard to a comment, that's a prepositional phrase. But here is the one you're going to trip over and over again if you're not careful. To, directly followed by a verb, plus a noun or pronoun object, is going to give you a verb phrase rather than a prepositional phrase. So to pull the viewer, this is a half verb, and it's creating a verb phrase. And to make her seem larger than life, again, to make is a half verb, and it's going to give us a verb phrase and not a prepositional one. The other tricky thing that we mentioned today was this. You can have an implied preposition, and when you do, it's going to be the word of. I can't think of a single exception to that. And so when you look at this particular part of the sentence we were looking at just a second ago, all the color reproductions of this painting show the pearl earring really turns out to be all of the color reproductions of this painting show the pearl earring. And that's true whether you see the of written or whether it is simply implied. Anybody with a question about that? And it means training your eye. It means training your eye and practicing. I want to look at this one more time, and I want to pick out the phrases that we didn't. Okay, we know we have the first ones because of the essence, and we know that that's a what. I'm back on page 87, and we know that of love is a what, And trapped inside of Greet's eyes, you told me could be where, and it could also be what. And for all eternity, we said could be what. What was the other one that you said, Scott? All of eternity, for all eternity, would be when. Let's look for some other phrases. Justin, got one for me?
At a recent
But end it with your noun object.
exhibition.
At a recent exhibition. I want to back that up just a touch. That particular comment was heard by one viewer at a recent exhibition. And that is going to answer
What?
or.
Where?
By either one. What or where. Yes. Jerry, find another one for me.
With regard to a comment made,
With regard to, ended at a different point.
a comment.
Right. And notice that one starts with a group preposition, just by chance. So with regard to a comment is going to answer
What?
what? Vince, can you find another one?
Of this image.
Of this image. I'm looking for that right here. And of this image answers
What?
what? Elbelin, where's another one?
About the timeless quality.
About the timeless quality. And that answers
What?
what? Kim, see another one?
From layers.
From layers. And that answers
What?
what? Farah, do you see another one?
Of pain.
Where is it? Say it again.
Of pain.
Of paint. Why am I not seeing that?
On the
That's
last
the
Right
sentence.
after from
Aha,
there.
right here, I got it. I see it. And of paint answers
What?
what? That's right. Justin, another one?
By the hands.
By the hands. And that answers
What?
what? Maritza?
By one viewer.
By one viewer. These comments heard by one viewer. And that answers?
By who?
So, definitely a who. I still don't think we have them all. Pippa, do you see another one?
Of a master artist,
And of a master artist is going to be,
either who or what?
let's try it. Let's back that one up. Timeless quality of this image brought forth from layers of paint by the hands of a master artist. I really want to be inclined to say what we're looking at his role. We still, I think we got it. I think we got them all.
Yep.
Okay. And again, when we look at this, it turned out to be a simple sentence, did it not? And it was determined by the fact that we had only one clause and not by the fact that we had multiple prepositional phrases. Does anybody have a question about that, Scott?
On that same example, isn't there one more prep phrase? I think you said with regard to a comment was one prep phrase, but isn't it two prep phrases? With regard is one prep phrase and to a comment is another one?
Well, yes and no. With regard to would be like with reference to. And I would see that as a
Oh.
group preposition, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I would be inclined to view that as a group preposition. Anybody else with a comment or a question?
Comment?
Yes.
Just from experience, that if you're not able to identify preps and prep phrases in sentences, you will continue to be troubled and confused in analyzing sentences.
Right, because you're going to pick up the object of a prepositional phrase and confuse it with the subject of a clause. That's the whole point. Good, and that's why we're doing it, just to get rid of that whole problem. So we're done with the simple sentence. We will have more to do with the prepositional phrase because you're going to do exercise 5 and find however many phrases we said, 58, 59 in 16 sentences. Was it 59? 59. Okay. And then we'll finish what we have to say about prepositional phrases and move on to the next sentence type. But do remember that you have a quiz forthcoming on the simple sentence to show me. A very simple quiz that you can get that absolutely right. Okay, we'll continue on.